Hello YouTube viewers, welcome to my channel Science to Technology. In today's show, Future Friday, we're going to talk about education system for the future. So let's dive deep into it. Now, many time people have, especially the young generation, they have bit too jaded view of education system. They think they have failed by the education system and things are not good. Now, of course, there is many things that are wrong right now, but let's understand what was the need for it. Like, why do we enforce learning on children? Well, we live in a hyper complex world. Let that be very clear. I can just say to you that there is sun and there is earth going wing 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 around it, but it's not as simple as that. There is complexity, there is dynamics, there is gravitational well, there is fighting between different system, and there is photon pressure, there is solar wind, there is other objects. There are way too much complexity there, and that's just sun, earth going. Be mindful, sun is also going somewhere. So fundamentally it's a very complex world. When you look at lightning, it's not simple, man. It looks like magic. It's like, and if you understand it from that point of view, you will get it why all older religions always classified lightning as a magical thing or a hammer of god or things of that nature. Every religion worldwide. So it's one of those things that our world is way too complex. Like on a scientific level, it's god level complexity. Like tsunami, like how the heck tsunami, earthquake, tornado, all those things that have superior power over us, their scale, their magnitude, it's ginormous. Like flat out, our puny mind cannot comprehend it when it does not have education. So that's why we need it, because if you do not have education or wisdom, all these things look like magic. That's why all old religions generally described weather events as a god's anger or something like that. All of them, many of them. And that's the whole point. Without scientific understanding, these things are indistinguishable from magic. It's like blah blah blah, something happened. Like that's why many older cultures used to have the concept of sacrifice. It's like because it looks like magic. So without it, let's say you do not have scientific understanding, you will fall for superstition. Do not hate our ancestors for their superstition. They did not knew better. We knew better, and that's why we enforce teaching on students, so they also know better. So superstition does not become a trip hazard for them. Like, a black cat cutting your road, bam, you're dead. So that's the whole point. Without a scientific understanding, superstitions are too attractive for us. And we have to understand these things affect us, so we have to understand it. And if you do not have scientific understanding, you will not be able to predict anything, let alone well adapt to it. For example, imagine going in past and telling to people, where it's like Japan is this country, it has earthquake, it has so much earthquake. Now it has trains that are traveling very high speed, very ludicrously high speed. And somehow they have built a technology that can detect earthquake before it happens, because again, if you understand science, you understand that not all shockwave travel at the same speed. Some travel much further range, so you can detect as quick as 30 like as late as 30 seconds early, or as as early as like 3 minutes, and depending on location and all that, they will tell you like what exactly the wave difference would be. But they can have a sensor network that detects it, triggers a fail-safe system in all locomotives in that affected area, and shuts down the train. Emergency brakes is applied when the earthquake is happening, and most of the time the trains are already stopped from high speed of 300 kmph to zero before the earthquake hits. Imagine explaining that. Think about it. Like, we are not only predicting something, we are adapting to it in future. Like now we can see, oh, earthquake is happening, oh, typhoon is building up, hurricane is building up. We can like, okay, this area will be affected, we can advance guard it. We're like, hey people, let's board up, let's get ready for it. National Guard will be put on high alert, flights will be rerouted, will not risk unnecessary things, everything will be on high alert. The nature will do its taundav, and then we're gonna be like, okay, everybody's calm, everybody good, calm checks, we good, we go. We do not even give a damn about it anymore. It's like so thorough with it. We can predict weather that precisely nowadays. So that's why there is a tangible need for it. Without it, this world, you and I can judge for it very easily, but without knowledge, like, we are taking that knowledge for granted. It's not granted. That's why we have to teach the damn thing. And with scientific understanding, we do not fall for superstition. And again, even if we do fall for it, it's very little compared to what it would have been otherwise. So there is a tangible need for it. If you want your country, your culture to grow, you need education. Now, what was the design for it? Let this be very clear. This was the optimistic, dreamy-eyed version of education, which we were trying with that. Like, this was Mark 1. We were trying with this. Let's just try to understand what they were trying to do. So we realized self-study is the key. You have to understand, books were invented quite early on. but we had to realize this as that rich people figured it out. Nobility at that time is like, hey, if everybody can read and write, they will be unstoppable. Because yes, the book has one of the magical ability which we call time travel, meaning I can study what Newton did. He could be dead for centuries or thousands of years, and I can still read what he wrote. I can understand him. I do not have to be alive exactly when Einstein was alive. I can still get his knowledge. That's why like time transitioning becomes possible, meaning all the knowledge gets compiled. Basically now you have densification of knowledge which can be accumulated. Like let's say farming technique, somebody did a lot of hard work to figure out how to farm it compressed all that data into a book. Somebody else can read that book. Now they can do almost as good as work as that one, and heck, they can even add to it. They're like, hey, that metallurgist, he figured these things out, and I started with that base work, repeated it, got the results, then I improved on it. It's like, whoa, we went from wrought iron to stainless steel. That's how it happens. Books can bypass time. So we learned very early on, if you can open a book and study it on your own, that's the key. Basically 99% of humanity's problem will be solved if you can do that, because all the knowledge, where is that knowledge? That's where it is. It's in book. So we realized very early on, reading, writing and speaking, these three are the core pillar of wisdom. Basically we must be able to read, we must be able to write, we must be able to speak it properly. Now here's the deal, let this be very clear, this is 0 to 100 kind of percentage. As long as you are above 60 or 70%, you're good. You do not need to be absolute genius in reading it. You do not need to be genius in writing and genius speaking. Now these things we just expect children to catch up on. Basically we give them a foundation, they build upon it. That's why some people become very sarcastic because they understand this speaking part way too well. So you get the point, right? That was the aim. We figured it out. Language is important. We have to read, write and speak. That's why every education system around the planet focuses on these three key elements. Now then we come to one annoying fact. It's like, why the heck we teach so many subjects? Now again, I will explain why it became so toxic now, but there was a good reason for it. The idea is that our world is understandable, meaning if things are happening, it's not happening out of magic. There are cogs behind it. Like there is things, there are rules, there are designs to it, basically, so to say. So understandable and knowable, that's the critical aspect, meaning you can study it. Think of it this way. Let's say you have a wall that is full of curtains. The curtain is unknowledge, like you do not know. Curtain is ignorance, and you can punch through it using knowledge. And it's like, okay, how the heck rain happens? You do not know. You punch through it with knowledge. What is the knowledge? Water cycle. That sun boils the water from the sea. It goes to the cooler part. It condenses. Clouds happen. Precipitation happens, and then the cycle repeats. That's how we can always have seasonal rains. Things work. Like you. And again, let this be very clear. It does not mean you know everything about it, but you know enough. And hopefully, you can do this with enough things that you know. I do not know. It's not the end of life. That means it's just like I have to study it in order to figure it out. Oh, that's how rain cycle takes care of it. But let's say you are not that interested into it. You opened it, you studied it, it's like, okay, I'm not that cool. But let's say you are a creature kind of individual. You like creatures. And you're like, well, why there are so many small creatures? Oh, there is a food cycle to it. There is an ecology to it, where you have small one getting eaten by a bit bigger ones, even bigger one, then even a babam, and then babam. All these things will allow you to see through that curtain. That ignorance curtain will be penetrated, and you will be like, okay, now I see. That's the whole point. Understandable and knowable. You do not need to be expert in it. All you need to be, oh, that's how it is. Oh, it is knowable. Meaning, you should not have a look to things where it's like, magic. You should not have that. That's the worst thing. That's how superstition comes in. You do not. Like, you always want to be able to say, this is an interesting machine. Let me look into it. That should be your response to it. Like, if you look at electric motor, it's like, it looks interesting. But there must be something that's how it's working. Like, that's the whole point. That's the whole aim of education. Everything that you see, it should be like Iron Man 1. When Iron Man first puts the Mark II suit and he's like, the steel one, is like, he looks around and Jarvis is like, the car, it selects the wheel and there's like Audi R8 and all that. It's like, that's how you're supposed to be. That's the point of the knowledge, that you should be able to look at things like, I wonder how it works, or you should have enough confidence in yourself that, hey, this is something possible. You look at transformers like, I studied it in class 7. Or transformer works like, step up transformer, step down transformer. Of course, you do not need to be precisely how they are laminating it, how they are cooling it. You don't need to be that precise, but you need to be knowledgeable enough where it's like, okay, it is not magic. That's the whole point of education, not magic. Everything is understandable, everything is knowable. That's the whole point. Even things that we have not understood yet. If you have this pipeline, it will be like, okay, maybe I'll be the one who cracks it. So you study history to know the past, because from a child's point of view, anything before grandparents did not happen actually. Like they never see it. Like think about it. Like, did you saw what happened to your great 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 grandfather? You don't. And again, the further you go back in time, the diluted the history becomes. So you do need history, some concept, or not like full high resolution 4K history, but enough where it's like, okay, I get it, I understand there is like things to it, there is a cultural significance to it, there is wars to it, like there is history that you are not aware of. You all this thing should be able to teach you is like you may find knowledge that you are seeking in the past also. Like there is things, especially when you are dealing with politics or culture. So that's the whole point. There is a past, and it could be stretching to hundreds of years. Math to measure things. How do you know how to calculate a budget? How do you know, like if your mom gives you, let's say $100, and let's say something is $50, you should get $50 back? It's very obvious to adult, but not to a child. If child is well educated, educated in math, it will be easily able to do it. Like if you say, hey, bring me 1.5 kilograms of sugar, it can only measure it if it fundamentally understands mathematics. That's why we teach mathematics and science, how everything works fundamentally in real life. Basically, it's not magic. When you study geometry, you can understand things. When you're looking at a CNC machine, if you actually come from a curious mindset and you are well educated, you will be like, okay, how is it working? Or somebody will say, motor. What kind of motor? It's like, it's something unique here. Then you're like, oh, stepper motor. Let me study. Oh, it has teeth that allows it to lock that effectively. You get the point. Nothing is magic. Like computers, it won't look magic to you. It will be like, okay, it's a thing that does something, I can look into it. That was the whole aim of the education system, where there is no magic, where you have the ability to penetrate it. Basically, the veil of ignorance can be penetrated by you. You will be like, I want to study this. Bye-bye. You're like, I got the knowledge. That was the design intent of it. Now let's understand how things went out of whack so thoroughly. We lost the plot somewhere in the past. I do not know where exactly, and yes, it happened worldwide. Somewhere we lost it. Like we went cuckoo on it. We just like, whoa. And what happened after that? Now again, let's be very clear. I'm a bit familiar with Asian history, so I'm a bit familiar what happened to our local ecosystem. So kid now has to be expert on everything. Somewhere that whole idea that education is just a training tool that helps you to train better. Basically, the idea with education is that you can decide your future because you have to grind on it, right? Like if you come from India, you will find very odd creature behavior, especially in younglings. You will say, why they are writing that they want to be IIT aspirant or they want to be this? It's never to do something, it's just exam. That's what happened. We focus so much on learning everything. Then how do you prove that you know everything? Exams. And the same happened in China, same happened in Japan, same happened in South Korea. It's like basically poor places. Now why I'm calling China poor places? China is rich now, it wasn't. And again, even today, like we have to carry that legacy. That's why you study the history, like, oh, you came from that. I'm freaking surprised, bro. You came this far. Look at India's history. Same thing. It's like we have been enslaved for so freaking long. It's a miracle that we can now feed 1.5 billion people. And yes, we are feeding them. Otherwise, people do not live on photosynthesis. We survive on food. We can take care of it. And same with Japan also. They were boomed out of existence. So that's the whole point. And there is a bitter aspect to it, is that more poverty you are in, the more load will be put on the student, meaning somehow we lose the restraint. Like you have to understand, the children would be stupid. They have to be stupid. Only then they can be curious. If you remove their stupidity, you also remove their curiosity, because they cannot afford to be wrong. If they cannot afford to be wrong, they are only good as books. They're not useful in real life. Even though they are studying it, they are not actually studying. For example, this is a very poignant thing in USA right now, is that these kids who went into college, they should have cleared a certain level of exam, and they did. They cleared high school. Here's the deal. How the heck none of them actually sat down and calculated what is the signing rate that they are doing for their education loan? Like they could study it. It's like they were saying compound interest. I'm pretty sure compound interest is taught in school very early on for this exact reason, because loan, mortgages, EMIs, things of this nature kills you in compound interest. On a single slot, it is not expensive, but many times you could have a scenario where your principal amount, meaning the amount that you are buying or renting, quote unquote, you have to pay 15x more than that. You won't know this if you're only focused, oh, this is the interest rate. It's compound interest rate. You have to do the calculation. You were taught that for that exact reason. People did not do it. So That's the whole point. And we are not updating it. Like, here's an example. Math books have so much useless junk. And I'm like, dude, all of the mathematics have such a good use where you can be like, hey, calculate EMI. Hey, calculate SIP. SIP is like you invest in mutual fund monthly. Basically, it's invert of EMI. EMI is negative and SIP is positive. So what will happen is, let's say it's the cold market, like, bear market, and it's like all that can be calculated. But instead of that, we have random BS made up. Unless you go to accounting study, then that starts to happen. I'm like, it should have happened in the school where people were going for this. They should not have been able to fall in a trap. Like, how the heck you can sign by reading a document which says that, oh, we're going to give you 1x of money and we're going to take away from you 30x of money. And yes, some scenarios it is that bad. I did not believe it, and I hope I'm still wrong that it's never that high. I genuinely hope it's only 2x. But way too many people are saying that it's like 3x, 5x, 6x, or sometimes 10x. So that's the whole point. Our books are not updated. It's just adding more to it. We are going bam to it. Now, what happens if you do this? Like, you do this in USA, you do this in Japan, you do this in India. India, I specifically know, is that we have output that is maladapted student. So what does that mean, maladapted? Is they're great in theory. They will clear all the exams. They will be like badass. They will be awesome on paper. But they will be really weak in real life. For example, in India, highest honor that you can achieve, like your family would be very proud, is get into IIT, Indian Institute of Technology. And if you want to know how much oomph it has, look into all the Indian CEOs. Most of them are from IIT. So it is significant on a world stage. Let that be very clear. There is no place, no country you can go to and say, like, you are from India's IIT. If they know the caliber of work that is done by them, is like, whoa. And I'm not joking. This is one individual who cleared both of them, IIT and MIT. He said IIT was harder. And yes, it is freaking hard. So IIT Bombay, there are only few branches of it. IIT Bombay, 60% of the graduates are opting for jobs not linked to the branch they studied in, meaning they could have studied one thing and they are doing job in another thing. How the heck that happened? Maladaptive. They were trying to become expert in everything and they failed horrendously. Everybody will fail. If you try to be expert in everything, you will fail. The whole idea of education system was you just know enough that it becomes an ecosystem in your mind where it's like, I do not know this. I am curious to know about this. Let me look into it. That curiosity is, this will come in exam, this will come in exam. This is a bit foreign concept to Americans, but it is a common concept for all Asians. Like, that's why we have the meme. It's like, A is average. B, no food for you. C, I disown you. D, die. So not updating, just adding that stuff, it's really brutal. Like, fundamentally, 90% of Indian engineers lack the key skills. How the heck that could happen? Because again, let this be very clear. These exams are hard, but that's the problem. We focus on that exam, not the fact that is the easiest way to explain that is like our dreams are so temporally small that temporal dimension, in time dimension, that we are only looking till 25 years old. We have no idea that life starts after 25 once you have cleared all your education, and then till 65 you grind. And if you do not have good adaptation, if you are not in the aptitude where you can truly shine, you will be miserable for the rest of your life. We cannot even comprehend it. And that's why, like, all the old people say, like, your education, it's college life, that's the easiest life. And children are like, what the hell, this is so hard. It's like, bro, hard life will happen after that. But if you focused on college itself, you are maladapted. You never went into real life. So when you go to real life and all the malpractice that happened due to parents' pressure, due to all other things, it compounds, and then it creates too much resentment, too much bitterness, and maladaptive students. Like, think about this, like, how the heck educated people could sign some document that fundamentally says, like, on paper just says, which you are signing, is that, and again, I think there should be a law that actually says that grand total how much you will pay. I think at least it will save 10 to 20 people. So that's the problem. Become expert in everything, backfired horrendously. And the more poor you are, the more miserable your education experience would be, especially in Asia. Let this be, I'm not that familiar with America, but it is many places of the world where it's like, be it Vietnam, be it Japan, be it South Korea, it's like, you have to be expert in everything, you have to be 99% score. And then Japan wonders like why nobody wants to create a family and future. It's like, oh, you kill their life and hope. And then you are surprised they do not want to give the same curse to their children. How? It's like, yeah, that's the whole point. On paper, they're great. It's like, on real life, it's like miserable. That's the problem behind it. So what's the solution? That's the problem. What's the solution? Solution number one, relax. Now, this is compulsory for poor people, compulsory for Asian parents. You need to relax. Not everyone is Einstein. You are not an Einstein. 99.99999% sure that your kid won't be an Einstein. Relax. Relax. And subjects need trimming. Like back in the days, if I was talking in data there were 5 gigabytes of data for a student of, let's say, 10 years old. Now there is 50. Dude, it's still a 10-year-old kid. It will not absorb that much information. It will fundamentally bounce off. Like, there is a point of oversaturation. Heck, pilots trainings are fundamental. The manuals that are made for pilot, they are very well written manual. Why? It's designed to be read through in a stressful situations. Open it up, wham, wham, bam. You do not study anything else. It's just like, this is how it's happening and all that. And we are like, what if we memorize the whole manual? Yeah, it's not going to work. So, and again, especially not on children. So subjects need lot of trimming. We have way too much history, way too much science, way too much. Strip it down. Make sure the curiosity survives, because here's the deal. That curiosity is the what allows you to grind after 25 to 65, and that's where people shine. So that's why majority of the toppers, college toppers, and you never hear about them, and you hear about backbenchers, because they found their aptitude most of the time, and then they shine. Because aptitude will allow you to grind from 25 to 65, and if you can't grind on it, you will become bitter, resentful, and bad things will happen. So subject needs streaming, and they need updating regularly. For example, today's history book should at least include that there is a war happening in Russia and Ukraine. Why? Because that's directly affecting the wheat prices. That's directly affecting the fuel prices. Like, those things should be there. So people say, oh, that's what I'm saying. And again, I will not expect it to be like revised every year, but annually it can be done. But it has to have some significance, because last 5 years we had a lot of wars. Most people don't know it. Many wars affected your food prices. You do not know it. So things of that way. It needs regular updating, especially in science books. Here's the mycelium network. It's a very recent phenomenon, as in like it happened after year 2000. It's still not there in many school books. And I do not think any school book actually has it. I genuinely hope I'm wrong. But that's the whole point. We have way too many oomph in the subject that needs to be trimmed down, and it needs to be updated regularly so people can actually attach to it. Like, oh, this is how a mobile phone happens. You do not need to teach young kids about, like, detail about floppy disks. You just say there was a medium, we used to use floppy, now we are in a flash medium. This is a mobile phone. You need to bring it up to date. You cannot just expect them to store all the data from the early days of computer to now. That will not work. But they have to store modern data. So it must be updated very regularly. And subjects must be linked to real world. This is part where we failed the most. This is the part where we dig our hole. Most people will take credit card and then randomly realize, why the heck I am so much in debt? Because you did not do the calculation. And bank gave you the documentation. They make sure the documents is very wordy. Why? They know nobody's going to read it. So fundamentally, and why you do not do this? Why not everyone inherently do this? If you are taking a loan, there's a very good chance you know how to read and write. But you don't do that because it does not click in your brain. Hey, didn't I study compound interest for this exact reason? It was never linked to you. So fundamentally, you are blind. Even though you have education, you are blind. So compound interest of loans should be the fundamental things of mathematics. Everybody should know this. We teach it. It's just like we have random things. It's like study papers, like history. Instead of having, literature, thousands of literature, throw majority of them away. Some, of course, do put some. Let that be very clear. Trimming, not eliminating. Trim it down, and then put some bank documentation there, some tax documentation. Can your kids read this? Like, not comprehend. Of course, they're not going to comprehend because it's written by lawyer language. But enough where it's like, okay, I'm getting somewhere. If they can ask the right question, that means they will be less likely to be taken advantage of. They will not eliminate complete mistakes, because be mindful, a lawyer is writing very thoroughly to make sure that you get messed up. But if you can read it, then you're like, there's some buffer, some filter. Other than that, nothing else can be done. But if you have some filter, you're like, okay, let me read this documentation. Before signing my life away, let me read it. All that documentation, tax documentation, that should be there, because that's only altered very rarely, and it's a national thing. You are giving national education. It should be there. It has to be there. It has to be there in English. It's like, this is tax documentation. What do you understand out of it? What you do not understand out of it? So, and that's the whole point. I'm not expecting them to become expert on it. I'm just expecting them to have that mindset where they're like, this is a ignorance paper. I do not know what it means, but I can read it. I will try to understand. Then I can go to someone else to like, hey, can you explain this further? Or what does this mean? Or I can go Google it. It's like, hey, what exactly this word means, or what is the inherent result? Like, that's the whole point. That was the expectation of knowledge. And computer needs far more focus on India. This part is from India's point of view. I am not joking. There are many Indian colleges, institutes, schools that teach computer as a side. I'm like, dude, there is no field left on this planet that can be handled without computers. No field. Like, no. Just no. Flat out no. Like Richard Dawkins, he literally wrote algorithms for evolution. That's how he managed to prove some certain of the hypothesis, because we knew evolution, but we did not knew the mathematics of it. He wrote a computer algorithm for us. Now, of course, he was not the best of it, but he knew enough where he's like, okay, let me see what's what. And that's in biology. I'm not even going into physics. Trust me. The computational logic you need there, it's like, so computers should be compulsory. I'm genuinely shocked that in India it's not compulsory yet. And we are going to AI age. If you do not understand computer fundamentally, on fundamental level, where it's no longer magic box to you, it's going to have serious consequences. Basically, you're going to lose to something that you don't even understand. Exactly how we had back in the day of the nobility and the poor. So that's the whole point. Like, we cannot have bags like this. Yes, it's a very painful pain point in India. We have to have computer education. We have to have kids in maker clubs so they can understand what they're reading supposed to be applied. It has to become a cycle. I was like, I'm studying it, I'm applying it. Oh, that's why it's supposed to be there. Rather than that's why we need to trim it. Like, we are putting trigonometry in mathematics. I'm like, dude, throw away trigonometry. And any field where you need trigonometry, you can introduce it later. You can just say, hey, trigonometry. When you are engineer, when you are adult enough to handle the brutality of it, you're like, I got this. Rather than burning them from childhood. It's like, hey, learn compound interest. It's already there. How about small examples? EMI, SIP, all those little things, hundreds of little things we can do there. Instead of teaching this novel and this hulululu, it's like tax documents, sir. That's your country's documentation. So there are some solutions here. Like, it has to be implemented to real world. It cannot be just like magical hoo-ha. It's like, this is what it is, this is what real world. Children must need to connect it. If they cannot, we have failed. So what is the hope here? Well, let this be very clear. I'm just hopeful at this. It's like, it will be fixed because it has to be fixed. You cannot survive a country if your education is really, really, really horrendous. It will not survive long term. Long term being around 120 years. 4 generations, give or take. 5 maybe, you can stretch it. But you will be taken over or you will be destroyed by natural events. So you have to have education, good one. So failure to do so, and not to mention, it's not just like, oh, you are dumb. No. You will be stupid and you will be in pain. That's the painful part of it. It's not an acceptable solution. For example, if you are living in a scenario where nobody is educated enough to understand why mycelium network is important, or why crop cycling is important, or why cover crops is needed, why these things are needed, your food prices will keep going up. And then you will be starving to death. Painful one. So fundamentally, you need to have a population that does not see world as magic or I don't understand. They have to be like, something is happening here, let me look into it. They need to have that tool service, like, this is a barrier of ignorance, let me penetrate through it. So if somebody is talking about, let's say, acid mine drainage, they should be able to understand, water gets acid dissolves more other things. Basically you have water that is acidic, now it's leaching heavy metals into it, and then that water is contaminating everything, and it's because it's acidic, it's destroying everything. You should be able to comprehend that, because again, you studied all of this in school. If you can't, that was the problem. It was never linked to real life. So we have to fix it. And then the weird part is, schools are getting expensive and teachers are not getting paid. What the hell? How the heck that's even possible? But then I realized there is even bigger demon here than I thought. At first I thought it was corruption, but no, even bigger demon is here. Excessive bureaucracy. When this layer happens, the end. Like, ironically, World War II gave European Union a kind of a clean slate, and they really did a lot of good work in that era. When they're like, everything was fresh, they did do good work in that point. I do have to respect that. Like, people are like, why, how the heck European Union has like this weird kind of hyper high technology where they're like, oh, you want semiconductor? Come to us. Come to Daddy. How? How the heck? That's the whole point. How the heck USA could go from a country that can put man on the moon to be like, can you please sell us oil? We're going to give you F-35 for oil. I'm like, bro, your country had Aquarius project that was shelved in 1998 that would have given all the oil that you could look for. And it was carbon neutral. That's the whole point. Bureaucracy is too much. Education, like, everybody now has this veil of ignorance for everything. And they do not fundamentally understand that that's why they were trained to penetrate through it. You can study anything, you can learn anything. Of course, you will not become expert on it, but you can reach a point where it's like, I get what's happening. Of course, not let that be clear, not expert, but nobody should be able to troll you. If somebody's like, oh, this loan has only this much interest, it's like, you can literally should have an inherent brain disc break where it's like, stop. Tell me how much I have to pay at that. And then you do the calculation on your end. And you're like, so you give me X, I have to pay 5X to you over 30 years? Yeah, no. So executive bureaucracy has to be sorted because no one's fault, but everybody is suffering. We have to fix this part. It has to be cleared out and everything has to be sorted. I do not know how. I do not know how that can be done without a big ass war, but it has to be done. Now, educational book, this part, it really hurts me, is that they are not open source. Educational book, now be mindful, why am I expecting the books to be open source? I'm not expecting a novel, Harry Potter or Song of Fire and Ice, all of those to be like, open source. But I do expect the thing that government is stamping you on should be open source, meaning you should be able to print it. Printing is cheap. And again, if you are getting governmental stamps on it, basically, if my brother became a doctor, which he is, he studied a lot of books. Those books were expensive. I mean, like, oh my God, they were expensive. Like, I'm saying that in India, and I'm talking about like at least Jesus, I'm old. 10 years ago, they were expensive. I do not even want to Google the price now. It was brutal. And again, what is this BS now that's happening? There is mafias of bookwares. Like, all the books are getting annual revisions and all they are changing is few words. It's like, what? That should not happen. Like, education from a national point of view, all those books should be open source. Thankfully, for some books there. It's not for higher education, but it needs to be there, especially until like graduation. If you want graduation level, at least graduation level books should be, of course, side books, extra study material, reference material, go YOLO on it. But this book, like if you study this book, we're gonna stamp you, like we're gonna give you the certificate, make sure that book is open source. So everybody can copy it, everybody can print it, and it does not have like stupendous prices. Like, trust me, look into the book prices of engineering and medical science. You'll be like, that no wonder nobody wants to become a doctor and engineer anymore. It's like, I've shown, like, kids are seeing TikTok and parents are seeing book prices. That's why nobody wants to be engineers. So all the education level book, let them be, I'm very clear and specific about that. Education book has to be open source. Government can buy the license or rewrite it. It can be done legally also. You can rewrite it. It's like, hey, I want doctors in my nation. I do not want to go them to be bankrupt before they even got out of college. At least books can be done. It's like, hey, books, child's play to printer nowadays. Heck, a lot of American people are doing homeschooling and they are printing their books. I have a printer that can do duplex and it's ink tank. I can easily print it without costing too much money. And high quality prints, I can print in an A4. So printing is not costly. Educational book, again, from a nation point of view, it's a really good investment to make sure that educational books are open source. So these are my hopes, that we remove excessive bureaucracy, because without bureaucracy, money is just burnt for no reason. We are just taking the money. People bitch about like, oh, what's the point of army training? We fire missile and we explode it for no reason. We burn billions of dollars. Here you are burning trillions of dollars and you are burning future dollars also. So fundamentally fix this part. That's bigger issue. Then books being open source, sometimes some nations have bought the license outright. It's like, okay, this book is important to us. We buy the license, we pay you, you're good. Okay, now mass produce it. So there has to be some solution to it. And because be mindful, if we do not, stupidity and pain that's what waiting for us at the other end. It has to be sorted. At least I hope for us. So this was a presentation on education for the future. Hopefully you have liked it, learned from it. In that case, please hit the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment. Please leave a comment because I do try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you're free, and as always, thanks for watching.